I was 8 months pregnant at my sister's wedding when her maid of honor kept kicking my chair until I fell to the ground. Everyone laughed at me, but when a handsome stranger walked over to help me up, his next words shocked the entire wedding, including my cheating sister. Before I tell you this jaw-dropping story of betrayal and revenge, hit that like button if you believe bullies always get what's coming, and subscribe for more shocking true stories. Trust me, this twist will leave you speechless. My name is Angela, and I never thought my own sister's wedding would become the most humiliating day of my life, until it became the day that changed everything. You see, being 8 months pregnant and struggling to make ends meet as a single mother-to-be wasn't exactly how I imagined my life would turn out. But sometimes life has a funny way of testing you before it blesses you. Let me start from the beginning. My sister Lucy and I had never been close, but I never imagined she could be capable of what I discovered just weeks before her wedding. I came home early from work one day. My back was killing me from being on my feet all day at the diner where I worked, and found my husband's car in the driveway. Strange, since he was supposed to be at his construction job until evening. I walked into my own house and heard voices upstairs. Laughter, my husband's voice, and another woman's voice that sounded eerily familiar. My heart was pounding as I climbed those stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I pushed open my bedroom door, the sight before me shattered my world completely. There was my husband of 3 years, the father of my unborn child, in bed with my own sister Lucy. They were so caught up in their affair that they didn't even hear me come in. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my hand instinctively moving to my belly, protecting my baby from the shockwaves of betrayal that were coursing through my body. When Lucy finally saw me, she didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Instead, she smirked, actually smirked, and said, "Well, I guess the secret's out." My husband scrambled to put his clothes on, mumbling pathetic excuses about how it just happened and how he never meant for me to find out this way. But Lucy? She just sat there completely naked and completely unashamed, like she owned the place. I confronted them both, demanded to know how long this had been going on. Turns out it had been happening for over a year. A year of lies, a year of coming home to a husband who was thinking about my sister while he kissed me goodnight, a year of family dinners where Lucy would hug me and ask about the pregnancy while secretly planning to destroy my marriage. But here's the part that broke me the most. When I threatened to tell everyone about their affair, Lucy laughed and said no one would believe me. She was getting married to a wealthy businessman in just 2 weeks, and she had her perfect life all planned out. Meanwhile, I was just her struggling sister who worked at a diner and could barely afford rent. My husband packed his bags that night and moved in with Lucy temporarily, claiming he needed space to think. Space to think. He'd already made his choice clear. I was alone, 8 months pregnant, with no income from his job and no family support. Lucy even had the audacity to continue planning her wedding as if nothing had happened. But my mother, bless her heart, forced me to attend the wedding anyway. "Family is family, Angela," she kept saying. "You need to be there for your sister's big day." She had no idea what Lucy had done to me, and I didn't have the heart to destroy my mother's happiness by telling her the truth. So there I was, standing in front of my closet the morning of the wedding, trying to find something decent to wear. Everything was either too small because of my pregnancy or too old and worn out. I finally settled on a simple navy dress that I'd bought on clearance months ago. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't expensive, but it was all I had. The wedding was being held at the exclusive Riverside Country Club, the kind of place where the parking attendant probably made more money than I did. Lucy had spared no expense, which wasn't surprising since her fiancé came from old money. As I pulled up in my beat-up Honda, surrounded by BMWs and Mercedes, I felt completely out of place. Walking into that venue was like entering a different world. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, fresh flowers decorated every surface, and guests mingled in designer outfits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I tried to hold my head high and find my seat, which I knew would be in the back somewhere. That's when I met Stephanie, Lucy's maid of honor. Stephanie was everything I wasn't: tall, blonde, perfectly manicured, and wearing a dress that probably cost more than my car. She took one look at me, and her face twisted into a sneer that she didn't even try to hide. "Oh, you must be the sister," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Lucy mentioned you might show up." The way she said it made it clear that Lucy had told her all about me, probably painted me as some pathetic charity case who couldn't even afford proper wedding attire. Stephanie looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my simple dress and scuffed shoes. "Well, I suppose we should find you a seat somewhere appropriate." She led me to the very back corner of the ceremony area, where a single chair sat slightly apart from all the others. The chair looked old and wobbly, nothing like the elegant white chairs where everyone else would be sitting. As I lowered myself carefully onto that chair, I immediately noticed it wasn't stable. It rocked back and forth with even the slightest movement, and I had to grip the sides to keep from falling. I looked around to see if there was another seat available, but the venue was packed, and this was clearly where I was meant to sit. The ceremony began, and I tried my best to blend into the background. Lucy looked absolutely stunning in her designer wedding dress, every inch the perfect bride she'd always dreamed of being. As I watched her walk down the aisle, I couldn't help but think about how she was getting everything she'd ever wanted. The rich husband, the perfect wedding, the fairy tale life, while I sat alone in the back, pregnant with a child whose father had abandoned us for her. But then Stephanie started her cruel game. It began subtly during the opening remarks. She was standing at the altar as maid of honor, but during quiet moments, she would glance back at me with this evil little smile. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but then I noticed other people looking at me too, whispering and giggling. During the exchange of vows, Stephanie stepped away from her position, supposedly to fix Lucy's train, but she walked right past my chair and, accidentally, bumped into it with her hip. The unstable chair rocked violently, and I had to grab onto the armrests to keep from falling. A few people nearby chuckled, thinking it was just clumsiness on my part, but Stephanie wasn't done. Oh no, she was just getting started. As the ceremony continued, she found excuse after excuse to walk past my chair. Each time she would bump it a little harder, making it rock more dangerously. By the time they were exchanging rings, I was genuinely worried about falling and hurting my baby. I tried to catch her eye, to give her a look that would let her know I understood what she was doing and wanted her to stop. But when our eyes met, she just smiled wider, like she was enjoying every second of my discomfort. This wasn't accidental. This was deliberate, calculated cruelty. The worst part was that other guests started to notice the wobbling chair and began to snicker. They thought it was hilarious that the pregnant woman in the cheap dress couldn't even sit properly. Some of them started taking out their phones, recording my struggle to stay upright on that broken chair. Then came the cocktail hour, and that's when things got really bad. Stephanie gathered a group of Lucy's friends, all perfectly groomed, wealthy young women who looked at me like I was something they'd scrape off their designer shoes. They formed a little circle around my chair, pretending to have casual conversation while taking turns, accidentally kicking or bumping into my seat. "Oops, sorry," one of them would say with fake sweetness after sending my chair rocking. "I didn't see you there." Then they would giggle among themselves like it was the funniest joke in the world. I begged them to stop, explaining that I was 8 months pregnant and worried about falling, but that just seemed to encourage them more. "Oh, come on, it's just a little fun," Stephanie said, loud enough for other guests to hear. "Don't be such a drama queen." She made it sound like I was overreacting, like I was the problem for not being able to take a joke. Other guests started gathering around to see what was happening, and suddenly I was the center of unwanted attention. That's when Stephanie announced her twisted idea to the crowd. "Hey everyone, let's play a little game with the wobbly chair," she called out, gesturing toward me like I was some kind of entertainment. "Let's see how long she can stay upright." The crowd thought it was hilarious. Here I was, 8 months pregnant, desperately trying to maintain my dignity, and they thought I was part of the wedding entertainment. People started placing bets on how long I could stay in the chair without falling. They were treating me like a circus act, not like a human being who was scared and in pain. I looked around desperately for my mother, for anyone who might help me, but everyone was either laughing along or pretending not to notice. Even some of the older guests who should have known better were chuckling and shaking their heads like I was putting on some kind of performance. But the absolute worst moment came during the toasts. Everyone had gathered around with their champagne glasses raised, and the best man was giving a beautiful speech about love and commitment. I was trying to stay as still as possible, just praying that the ceremony would end soon so I could go home and cry in private. That's when Stephanie positioned herself directly behind my chair. I could feel her presence, could sense the malicious energy radiating from her. The best man reached the climactic moment of his speech, everyone's attention focused on the happy couple, glasses raised in celebration, and that's when Stephanie struck with full force. She kicked my chair with everything she had, sending it toppling backward. I fell hard, my pregnant belly exposed as I crashed to the ground. My water glass flew from my hands, soaking my dress and creating a puddle around me. The sound of the chair hitting the ground echoed through the silence that followed the toast. For a moment, the entire wedding fell silent. Then, like a dam bursting, the laughter erupted. Everyone, and I mean everyone, was laughing at me, pointing, taking pictures, recording videos of the pregnant woman sprawled on the ground in her cheap, wet dress. Even Lucy, my own sister, was giggling behind her hand like it was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. I lay there on the cold ground, my back aching, my belly exposed, feeling more humiliated than I'd ever felt in my entire life. No one moved to help me, no one asked if I was okay. They were all too busy laughing and filming my misery to show any basic human decency. I started to cry. Not just from the physical pain, but from the complete and utter degradation of it all. Here I was, betrayed by my husband, abandoned by my family, and now publicly humiliated by a room full of strangers who saw me as nothing more than entertainment. I tried to get up on my own, but my belly made it difficult, and every time I struggled, the laughter got louder. That's when I saw the shoes. Expensive leather dress shoes stepped into my line of vision, and I looked up to see a man kneeling down beside me. He was handsome, devastatingly so, with dark hair and kind eyes that looked genuinely concerned. He was wearing an impeccably tailored suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months, but there was something warm and approachable about him. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice cutting through the laughter like a knife. "Here, let me help you up." He extended his hand to me with such gentleness that I almost started crying again, but this time from gratitude rather than humiliation. As he helped me to my feet, I noticed how the crowd's laughter began to die down. There was something about this man's presence that commanded respect, even from Stephanie and her cruel friends. He steadied me carefully, making sure I wasn't hurt before turning his attention to the crowd. "I'm Nathan Pierce," he said in a clear, authoritative voice that carried across the entire venue. I watched as Lucy's fiancé went completely white at the mention of that name. Other guests began murmuring among themselves, and I could see recognition dawning on their faces. Nathan Pierce. Even I had heard that name before. He was one of the wealthiest businessmen in the state, known for his real estate empire and philanthropic work. What was he doing at Lucy's wedding? And why did everyone suddenly look so terrified? But Nathan wasn't done. He helped me over to a proper chair, a stable one, and made sure I was comfortable before turning back to address the crowd. The laughter had completely stopped now, replaced by an uncomfortable silence that seemed to stretch on forever. "I've been watching this entire spectacle with great interest," Nathan continued, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. "What I've witnessed today is not just cruelty, it's criminal harassment of a pregnant woman, and I have it all documented." He pulled out his phone and held it up, showing that he had been recording everything. The color drained from Stephanie's face as she realized that her moment of cruel triumph had been captured for posterity. But then Nathan said something that made my blood run cold and sent shockwaves through the entire wedding party. "You see, I've been watching Lucy very carefully for the past several months. I know all about her affair with Angela's husband. I know about their plans to steal Angela's inheritance, and I know exactly why I'm here today." The silence that followed was deafening. Lucy's face went from radiant bride to terrified woman in seconds. Her new husband stared at her with confusion and growing horror as the pieces began to fall into place. Nathan continued, his voice never wavering. "Angela, your father was my business partner and dear friend. Before he died, he set up a trust fund for you, a substantial one. Your sister has been intercepting the communications and stealing your inheritance for years, using that money to fund her lifestyle while you struggled to survive." I felt like the ground was falling out from under me. My father had died when I was young, and I'd always been told there was no money, no inheritance, nothing left for me. But Lucy had been living off my money this entire time? While I worked double shifts at the diner and worried about how I'd afford diapers for my baby? The crowd was in complete chaos now. Lucy's new husband was demanding explanations, guests were murmuring and pointing, and Stephanie looked like she wanted to disappear into the ground. But Nathan wasn't finished delivering justice. "Furthermore," he continued, "I've been documenting the systematic harassment and assault that took place here today. Deliberately causing a pregnant woman to fall could be considered assault, and I have multiple witnesses and video evidence." Stephanie tried to stammer out some excuse, claiming it was all just harmless fun, but Nathan cut her off with a look that could freeze fire. "There's nothing harmless about what you did. You endangered both Angela and her unborn child for your own amusement. I've already contacted security, and they'll be escorting you off the property immediately." As if on cue, 2 security guards appeared at Stephanie's side. She looked around desperately for support, but even her friends had abandoned her, not wanting to be associated with someone who had just been publicly exposed and humiliated by one of the most powerful men in the state. But the biggest shock was yet to come. Nathan turned to Lucy, who was now openly crying and trying to hide behind her wedding dress. "As for you, Lucy, your fraud has been reported to the authorities. The inheritance you've been stealing will be returned to its rightful owner, with interest. Your husband's company, which happens to be one of my subsidiaries, will be conducting a thorough review of this situation." Lucy's new husband looked at her with disgust and disbelief. "Is this true? Have you been lying to me this entire time?" When Lucy couldn't answer, just stood there crying and shaking, he pulled off his wedding ring and threw it at her feet. "This marriage is over before it started," he announced to the crowd. "I won't be associated with a thief and a liar." He stormed out of the venue, leaving Lucy standing alone in her expensive wedding dress, completely ruined. The crowd began to disperse, the party atmosphere completely destroyed. Guests were whispering among themselves, some looking ashamed of how they had participated in my humiliation, others just eager to escape the dramatic scene. Nathan turned back to me with that same gentle expression he'd shown when he first helped me up. "Angela, I've been trying to find you for months to inform you about your inheritance. Your sister has been very clever at hiding your whereabouts and intercepting communications. But when I heard she was getting married, I knew this would be my chance to finally make things right." I was still in shock, trying to process everything that had just happened. "My father really left me money?" "More than money," Nathan smiled. "He left you a fortune, enough to ensure that you and your child will never have to worry about financial security again. He loved you very much, Angela, and he wanted to make sure you were taken care of." As we talked, I noticed that many of the wedding guests were approaching me, the same people who had been laughing at me just minutes before. Now they were apologizing, looking ashamed, trying to make excuses for their behavior. It was amazing how quickly their tune changed once they realized who I really was. But I wasn't interested in their apologies. These people had shown me their true character when they thought I was powerless and vulnerable. Nathan seemed to sense my feelings because he gently guided me away from the crowd. "There's something else," he said as we walked toward the exit. "I'm looking for someone to help manage my charitable foundation, someone who understands what it's like to struggle, what it's like to be overlooked and underestimated, someone with real character who won't be corrupted by power. Would you be interested?" I looked back at the chaos of the destroyed wedding. Lucy sobbing in her ruined dress, Stephanie being escorted out by security, guests standing around in uncomfortable silence. Then I looked at Nathan, this kind stranger who had appeared like a guardian angel in my darkest moment. "I think I'd like that very much," I said. 6 months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Nathan was there at the hospital, not as a romantic interest, but as the closest thing to family I had left. He'd become like a protective older brother, helping me navigate my new life as a wealthy woman and teaching me how to use my inheritance to help others. The charity work turned out to be my calling. I was able to help other women who found themselves in situations like mine, abandoned, pregnant, struggling to survive. We provided financial assistance, job training, and emotional support. It felt good to turn my pain into purpose, to help others avoid the humiliation and desperation I had experienced. Lucy tried to contact me several times, begging for forgiveness and financial help. Apparently, her husband's family had completely cut her off after the wedding scandal, and she was facing serious legal consequences for the inheritance theft. But I wasn't interested in reconciliation. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive, and I had learned that blood doesn't always make someone family. As for Stephanie, she became something of a social pariah after videos of her cruelty went viral online. Nathan had made sure the footage was shared with all the right people, and her reputation was destroyed. She lost her job, her social standing, and most of her friends. It turns out that people don't like associating with someone who would attack a pregnant woman for entertainment. My ex-husband tried to come crawling back when he heard about my newfound wealth, claiming he'd made a mistake and wanted to be part of his child's life. But I had learned my worth, and I wasn't about to let him back in just because I was no longer the struggling woman he'd abandoned. Looking back on that terrible day at the wedding, I realize it was actually the best thing that could have happened to me. Yes, it was humiliating and painful, but it also revealed everyone's true character, including my own. I learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined, that I could survive betrayal and humiliation and come out better on the other side. More importantly, it brought Nathan into my life, and through him I discovered my true calling. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to our greatest blessings. Sometimes we have to fall completely before we can rise higher than we ever dreamed possible. And sometimes, just sometimes, karma comes in the form of a handsome billionaire who believes in justice and isn't afraid to deliver it. If this story gave you chills and proves that karma is real, smash that like button and share it with someone who loves justice being served. Subscribe for more incredible stories of bullies getting their comeuppance. And remember, sometimes your darkest moment is right before your biggest breakthrough. Have you ever been publicly humiliated? Tell me your story in the comments.